This takes me back to my middle school days. It's a funny time, I think, in a lot of our lives. We're feeling anxious, and we're figuring out hormones, and we're nervous about school. 13-year-old Rachel, awkward. You have your first romance at the time, and I was figuring out what it meant for me to be queer in this small, quasi-rural town in Massachusetts, just outside of major cities, but we're in this little cow town. And you're fighting with those tensions as you're growing up, figuring out who you are, what you want to be, how you can be proactive in driving that storyline. This is what I was figuring out in 8th grade. Science was also a way for me to discover my own interests and who I was and where I fit in all of that. Mrs. Roberts, 8th grade, Earth Science. We take a rope, and we use the length of the rope to signify the length of the age of the universe. So let's say the rope is 100 feet long. At starting point 0, inch 0, at my feet, lies modern day. She lays the rope out down this long, long corridor in our middle school. And at the very, very end, she raises her hand and she says, "This is the age of the universe. This is over 13 billion years ago." And Mrs. Roberts starts walking back from the end of the rope, and she waves her hand at roughly 4.5 billion years ago. That's when the Earth was formed. And she gets even closer to me, and now she's just a few inches from the end of the rope, and she says, "This is when humans evolved." And she gets to the very, very end, and now she's standing right next to me. And she says, in the last little minute length of the rope, less than 0.001 of an inch on that 100-foot-long rope. And that's the time period that we live in right now. It's called the Holocene Epoch, the last 12,000 or so years. So humans have been around in the blink of an eye. And I have this very distinct memory of looking down the hallway and just having tunnel vision. And all of a sudden, I feel so tiny. How can humans, physically so tiny, be impacting the world around us when the world around us is already just a speck of dust floating somewhere in the universe? This was the interest for me. Antarctica, it's an amazing place. I traveled to the dry valleys. It's the largest expanse of ice-free land on the entire Antarctic continent. And you can walk right up to what are called cold-based glaciers. And these are a special type of glacier that are frozen at their bed to the underlying bedrock. And because of this, when you walk up to the face of the glacier, it's vertical. It's like walking up to the edge of a skyscraper. I went on to study how glaciers were impacting landscapes, how they've grown and shrunk in response to shifts in ocean patterns and climate patterns. And this is what I pursued graduate school research in, but I realized how I was impacting climate change, how we, my family, my society, the economic systems within which we operate, the societies within which we operate and depend upon, how are we impacting climate change? So my research shifted very, very strongly to the intersection of human society with those natural systems. I wanted to, once again, return to that understanding of where Rachel was in all of this story. It's not as if we step into our lab coats and go off to do an experiment and leave who we are at the door. Years ago, I heard this phrase that many folks are familiar with, and it says, "Be the person at the front of the room that you needed to see when you were in the classroom." I wasn't exposed to queer scientists, and it matters that the students that I work with and the children that I work with and the families that I work with, it matters that they understand that it doesn't matter about your background or who you love or where you grew up, as long as you're coming and doing your science fully.